Item 11A, the item about the tents, we're going to have that right. We're going to be moving that to item just after 8, so that people who want to speak to that can do so. But we just have a little bit of business ahead of time. So, Julianne and Sherry, if you'd be willing to read the roll call.
I'd first like to note that Chair Ian Roth is absent by prior arrangement. Vice Chair Holly Madison is here. Review Board Member Alan Saunders.
Here.
Review Board Member Holm Kepler.
Here.
And Review Board Member Ishii Ohm.
Here.
And then if I may, I'd like to just introduce, I don't think you've met planner TSR. Previously, she's here this evening along with planners Jesse Baldwin, Stephen Spicer, myself, and the director.
And has legal determination been made?
Yes. Everything's on
So we have approval of the minutes. This is for, the first one is March of 2023. Are there any? Paul, go ahead.
I've submitted some very minor editorial comments to the staff already, and the only other thing I wanted to notice is that the March minutes have been scrambled in terms of the pagination, and that needs to be cleaned up on the website. That's it for me.
I just had one thing on, I think it's 8B when we were talking about the windows over on Mendocino Realty. Let's see. Under review board discussion, the second paragraph has that I commented about the specification sheet about the windows, and I would not have known that. You should just strike that sentence. I think member mentioned the specifics of the windows being different than the sheet. So yeah, that wasn't me. Okay, do we have a motion?
Quick question, if I may.
Yeah.
Planner Walden, was that for the
That was for the
March or the April?
March.
Meetings?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You can just strike that. Do we have a motion for the March minutes?
I'll make a motion just for the March minutes.
Just March.
Okay, to approve the March minutes with the minor amendments that I mentioned.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, what about April? Any changes? I'm usually not the one who has changes, but I do have one. For the Temple of Quantai, under review board discussion, it mentions that I may have mentioned that the fence could be visible from High Street. It turns out it's not visible at all, so we can strike that. Okay, is there a motion for the April minutes?
Make a motion for the April ones, so we approve them, subject to the small amendment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you guys for that, and thank you, staff, for getting those done. Okay, agenda item number 5, this is correspondence. Do we have any correspondence received for items not on the agenda?
No, we do not.
Report from the chair, I have none at this time. Okay, so this is public expression, and this is for items that are not on the agenda today. So the review board welcomes participation in its meetings. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person and not more than 10 minutes per agenda item so that everyone may be heard. Public expression items are limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the review board that are not on today's meeting agenda and items that were not previously considered. So this is separate from all the things we're going to discuss. So does anyone have any topics outside of that they would like to comment on? Okay. We're going to have plenty of comment, don't worry. Okay, was there any email or mail requests for public expression? Okay, so we're gonna move to item 11A. So,
What about the consent?
There's nothing on
there's
it.
nothing on consent calendar, sorry. Yeah, I'm squeezing it in, I'm squeezing it in here. So, item number 11A is an update regarding the urgency ordinance regarding temporary business modifications during the COVID-19 pandemic, approved by the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors on October 20th. And I believe Director Fogg has some updates on this?
Yes, thank you. Julia Crog, Planning and Building Services Director. So the update is that the urgency ordinance has terminated because the termination date written within the ordinance was slightly unclear. What staff will be doing is this week we'll be putting out a press release to the public because this urgency ordinance applies to all areas of the county, both town of Mendocino, inland areas, and coastal zone. Letting folks know that this will begin that 90-day window during which they would need to come in and submit the appropriate permits to legalize any improvements that they have done or remove those improvements after the 90 days. And so when I talk about legalizing those improvements, that consists of coming in and applying for any required discretionary permits, including review by the Historical Review Board, or coastal development permit, if applicable, and then also any required building permits that may be required for those improvements. And all sites are very different in terms of what their entitlements are and what may be required, so we highly encourage folks that if they did make temporary business modifications to contact our office to understand what may be required to be demonstrated or required permitting to legalize those improvements if they wish to keep them.
Okay, so we spoke earlier and I was asking about like existing, in the before times, existing businesses, if they wanted to put up a tent for say a wedding, they would apply ahead of time
Correct.
that on this date to this date, we're gonna have a tent up outside. This is what happened before, right? And that also in the past, that was able to be done for a season. Or maybe, I think that maybe has happened, where it was
Yeah.
like, you know, this season, we're gonna have the tent up 5 times.
Right, so some applicants apply every year, and after the board has seen, experienced multiple years of, say the McCullum House, they have a tent up for weddings multiple times during the year. They got approval for multiple years even. The circus is another example. They come every year, it's fairly consistent, the board is familiar with the activity, and so they also approved multiple years for the circus tent. Other venues, maybe there's a lady who occasionally has a wedding across town. She's applied for each event separately, and you know, like one daughter married one year and a niece another year or something like that.
Okay.
And just to be clear, so the one benefit that was associated with the urgency ordinance was there was some exceptions to standards from the code, including not counting for its lot coverage and also not required to have additional parking established for those temporary business modifications, and also allowing you to use some of your required parking spaces as applicable to have those tents placed up. I don't think that that's so pertinent in the town of Mendocino, where there's largely on-street parking and not a lot of off-street parking, but again, that ordinance applied countywide.
Okay, so this is really the ending of the COVID exemptions for
Correct.
all of the tents, and it's moving into what it was. And you had mentioned that we don't have the authority to say, because this came up, we do not, as the MHRB, have the authority to say all tents are okay, or, you know, like, we don't have that.
So only the Board of Supervisors has the authority to adopt ordinances.
Okay.
This body is a review board that reviews the design for consistency and harmony with the historic district. So any regulations being set would be set by the Board of Supervisors as opposed to a review board here.
Okay. Okay, so are there any questions up here before I open it to the public? Any questions?
Is it tents or water tanks as well? I've seen this thing about tanks, is that considered separately? or is
That's
that-
a separate.
That's a separate item that we'll talk about too, that there's also been a termination of the drought emergency. So as a result, there's been the automatic termination of 2 other urgency ordinances that were adopted.
And
by the
that's
board.
separate from this?
That's separate from the tent.
Okay.
So as I understand what the director said. We're in a position where within the next 90 days or so, any business that wants to have a permanent tent has to come to this board and request our agreement to put up such a tent.
Yes, so I want to be clear that applicants only need to file their necessary discretionary permits within 90 days. So it may be, you know, a bit after 90 days before this review board may see any applications in front of you
Right,
for
but-
those.
The process is to file, and then it comes to the board, and then we consider each on a case-by-case basis.
That is correct.
Okay.
And you could, in theory, and I want to hear from the public, but you could, in theory, apply to have a tent up for 6 months.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
No.
Okay, so,
I just want to note too, there's been a couple letters of correspondence submitted, and one unfortunately we received after we had printed for today, so it is posted online. I did email that to the review board members from Ed O'Brien as well, so you have that.
okay, I did,
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I read that.
sure I even printed it. Oh, no, I printed it. So we can have those. I also did, receive a number of comments on social media before I got here, which I don't know the best way to have those into the record. But I think what we might want to do, what do you think is the best way to do it? To have the public comment and then read the letters in? Okay. So I would like to welcome the public to speak to this item if you'd like. If you would like to speak, please come up to the podium and state your name if you're willing to for the record, as well as limiting your comments to 3 minutes so that everyone can have a chance to be heard.
Can we move the podium, because we can't see part of the board? Maybe handy, I don't know.
We actually were videotaping the meeting and we
We were.
very carefully located things so everyone
Never
could
mind.
be on camera.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah,
That
removable.
Let's see.
And maybe no one wants to speak, does anyone want to speak to this item?
Hi, Roger, I lived here in town full-time the last 5 years, and I really enjoy town. Part of the reason I moved to town is it's so charming. I used to live in Laguna Beach before moving here. That town is charming, although less charming than it used to be. But, so I like the beauty, I like the water tanks, I like the history. But as a retired entrepreneur and professor, I eat out in town 4 days a week. Pre-COVID, post-COVID. This is not the reason to keep tents, but selfishly having some skin cancer issues, it's nice to have cover, but the reason I think you need to consider some things like, from a business point of view, seeing through COVID, seeing post-COVID, certain days the restaurants can sell the tables out 3 times over, and certain times the restaurants are empty. And if you take away tents on days that people are eating outside when it's raining, which I do a lot because it's full inside or whatnot, then they lose revenue, and potentially the town will lose, I don't know if they get a sales tax revenue, staff might get cut, who knows? So I think there's implications from a business consideration point of view that need to be considered a balance where businesses will say lose revenue. How do I know this? Because I'm the revenue. Because I know Saul, I know Sandra, I know Tanya, I know Peter, I know Melissa. And I think I take a lot of my guests and a lot of my neighbors in Surfwood to eat at their establishments. And I enjoy the tents. And by the same token, although I like the Thinking Circus and the sponsor there, I don't like Ringling Brothers, so I don't particularly think the tents are that attractive the way they sit right now. So maybe there's a compromise of something like, instead of having every business owner send an application, they know how to do, they have time to do, maybe the smart people in the room at the back end who have come up with a design that you like for a modified, not a tent, maybe it's a pergola, maybe it's something that, I don't know, matches the water tower, maybe it's something aesthetic and pleasing to the community. And you come up with a uniform design that you approve, then you give to the business owners instead of having to have them individually submit and looking hodgepodge, and God knows how long that would take to review. So I would like to see a compromise, and understanding there's reasons like business, and whatnot, and other things, that maybe there can be a uniform design proposed by the powers to be, that then the business owners who choose to modify or change their tents to the approved tents, it can be easy, fluid, and not have 90 million meetings, no offense, it's never been to me like this in my life, okay, but unfortunately for my neighbors who wanted to be here in Surfwood, I feel like they could not, they're not in town, but we all live out in town, and I can tell you right now, they do not come on social media, they're old, they're all pro some form of tent.
Roger, do you mind saying your last name?
Abrams. Yes, I'm from New York City. I moved here 5 years ago full time. I had 300 wonderful employees. I retired and became a professor at Ford. I worked at UCLA when I was in California. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
My name is Beth Ross. I was here when the Mendocino Historical Review Board was created, and pretty was not the reason. The reason was a group of developers from Nevada, from Reno, Nevada, planned on putting condominiums all across the blocks, from the gas station to as far as they had money to go. And the town went to the board of supervisors and said, nobody here wants that. We don't want you to approve it. And the board of supervisors told us there's nothing in our ordinances that permit us to do that. We're going to have to create a device to do it yourselves. And out of that came the Mendocino Historical Review Board. And that was to keep a bunch of glass condominiums off the block. Out in Mendoza went from door to door begging for support from members of the Portuguese families, assuring them that this ordinance would have nothing to do with their lives. They gave it to paint their houses whatever color because it was a very colorful community. You could put up all these little cuts and hatches that many of the Portuguese families had that hadn't at the time. He assured them that the Historical Review Board would not interfere with their lifestyles. So to begin with, at its inception, the sentiments of the residents of the town were taken very, very seriously. The tents provide the necessary protected space that this town so drastically needs for the restaurants. We cannot afford to put up, to attach cold buildings to what they already have. It just, it's just too expensive. It's just too, and it never gets through because of water regulations. Tents that popped up are such an incredibly respectful and right solution for this time. I personally don't think any kind of requirements should be put on what your tent looks like. It's, I think the proprietors should just have a say-so to figure out what's going to cover the most space and be safe. I would just like you to be sensible and use what powers you have to extend, and then when it comes up again, continue to extend the permission to have tents attached to restaurants. It's such a sensible solution. Don't screw that up.
My name is Derek Murphy. I am on the board of the Mendocino City Community Services District, MCCSD. I haven't talked with anybody that is opposed to the tent stand. For myself, I like the tent, I use some, particularly at churches. I do like that. say that on behalf of the NCCSD, when the tents went up, we recognized that there may be additional water use and additional load on the sewer system. And because of COVID, we sort of just said, we're not going to do anything about that now, but now that things have changed, the emergency is over. I just wanted to let people know that we will be working with businesses in town about tents and trying to figure out a fair way to make adjustments in water and sewer fees that take into account any increased business because of them. And again, I just want to say that for myself, I think the tents are helpful, good for people in the town and certainly for the
That's a good question. Have you found an increase in the past?
I don't know that we've spent the time to look at it,
Yeah.
but it's something that we need to do, and I think over the next few months, we will be doing that and engaging in conversations with people to try to figure out. And it's important that we have a very aging, very old sewer system, and it's going to need to be replaced at some point. And with respect to water, everybody knows that we all share the same stuff and we need to be careful with it. So there needs to be some discussion around tents, not necessarily with this board or with the county, but with participants in the NCCSD to make sure that any fees, any adjustments need to be made to make sure that the fees are fair to everybody. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Would anyone like to speak to this item? Will we bring it back up here?
My name is Stephanie Simmons, I've lived in town almost 10 years, and I'm going to be a dissenting voice, but I would like to speak against the tents. You are a historic review board, here to review and to ensure the historic safety, if you will, of our town, and I see in no way mismatched, missized, misshapen tents as part of history. Some of them have been even let go to have mold and brown, horrible spots all over them, and then they have to be sprayed to correct that with God knows what every place. It's not to say that you shouldn't still have your business space open for outdoor space. The Beaujolais Cafe is a perfect example of using an outdoor space in a welcoming, expansive way without having tents all over the place. And I think it can be done with gardening spaces, or as the other gentleman suggested, perhaps a pergola or something.
The other gentleman still wants the tents, so we'd rather have the tents as they are.
Excuse me,
not-
sir, we need to
Oh,
make sure
sorry,
that.
sorry.
You said a compromise, a compromise. I believe he said a compromise.
But I'd rather the current tent than nothing, if that's what you're saying. Sorry.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
At any rate, I'm close to my 2 minutes. I've lived here, I'm a contributing citizen, I've done the gardens at the post office, I volunteer at the library. I'm one of the few. There's only about, well, there's less than 50% of us who live in town full-time and aren't vacationers or tourists, and I just think that we should count for a little something. We are at least important, or as near important as some of the businesses. And you're here to make historic designations. How are flimsy white tents historic? Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item?
Well, I'm one of the guys with the tent. Tony Graham, Patterson's Club. We're talking about a health and safety issue. COVID is not finished with us. It's still mutating. I would venture to say almost half of my patrons are masked and prefer to dine outdoors, not indoors. The tent is needed for health and safety reasons. I understand the whole historic thing, I really do. The building that I have now is in try to comply with everything the review board wants. But we're not dealing with architecture, we're dealing with health and safety. If this COVID mutates this next fall, as it will, and that's what the CDC is projecting, we're gonna have a serious problem. So I would hope that the board would take that into consideration in evaluating who has tents and who doesn't. As far as tents being dirty, we power wash ours monthly, so there is no mold on it. We've screened it from the street, so you barely can see it. And as far as water usage is concerned, during this stage 4, we complied to the letter with everything that the sewer district wanted to impose on us. We did not increase our water usage with the tent. We maintained the same. So it's not impacting the water system, it's not impacting the sewer system. I would hope the board would approach this whole thing in a rational manner. I just read in the Beacon that the sales tax revenue for the county, front page article last week, is way down. Well, who pays the sales taxes? I do. I'm the one that supports this county. And that needs to be taken into consideration if you're going to restrict businesses from having outside dining. So I would appreciate your support for myself, my family, and this family.
I'm Deborah Lennox, architect. I have an office on Main Street. This is such a huge issue. I've had people calling me and asking me for my advice about potential gazebos or outdoor covered dining area. I think it's such a big issue, it needs to be studied, and I'm hoping if there's some review board action that would come from this lifting of the ending of the special exemption, that we could get a 1-year extension to actually look into it at least, and then also see if COVID is really in, in remission, if you will, and we can relax a little more. But I also agree, I prefer to eat outside, and next year when the winter comes along, having those covered spaces outside to eat for at least 1 more year will give us some time to look at the water usage and the lot coverage and all the issues that tents do bring up. But I would strongly encourage not making any quick decisions that would impact what we've got right now. Thank you.
You want to submit your comments?
You're targeting me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to speak if you don't. You don't have to.
I wasn't sure how to present these actually, but I have hundreds. My name's Teddy Winslow, and I own Good Life Cafe. And code enforcement visited us recently and told us that we need to visit the issue of our tent not being permitted, which I did try to get permitted at the start of the COVID outdoor dining requirements. I did call the planning department and ask for that. They told me they were going to waive it through the pandemic, and now it's time to address it. So I put out comment cards to see what both the locals and the visitors had to say about it. And I wanted to present those. I have hundreds, I have 400 plus here, and I think the other places also. Sandra is the one that came up with the idea from Trillium. I can't take credit for it because I copied hers, her idea. I believe Jeannie from Patterson's also has hundreds, and she prepared a binder so that you have visitors and locals' comments on why the tents are important to them. And beyond the safety of people's health, that was the predominant comment that I got. There were people with immune compromised conditions other than COVID, sensory issues, people that have allergies to pets and support animals. They can eat under the tent and still not make somebody else have an allergy. we were able to space our tables out so people had a little more space inside. I also, through the years, invested a lot of money on my patio furniture to accommodate the dining outdoors, which I already had a deck, so it's not like I covered more space. But I did actually invest a lot of money in preparing the outdoor for the people, which would be really sad to have to lose half the year if I didn't have that coverage, as well as laying off half of my staff that I hired to accommodate the requirements of the demand of the public. And then the last thing is you know, I am one of the largest employers in the village at 29 employees, and we do pay a lot of tax. And if the taxes are going down and you guys keep squashing the little businesses, they're gonna continue to go down. And maybe we can work, like Roger said, on a unified design. You know, over the years, the Spanish flu, the different issues that the town had to meet, they had to make arrangements and change the rules here and there and make new laws to accommodate the needs. Maybe that can happen now, and we can have a unified, something that's more affordable than having to $100,000 structure to cover the deck. Maybe you guys could authorize a canvas, retractable, something or another, anything that you guys, you know, give us some guidance so that we're not spending thousands of dollars with architects and then getting rejected. Would be awesome.
Does anyone want to speak to this?
Claire Romano, lived here since 1982, currently a realtor, been in retail, restaurant business, everything throughout the years. First of all, the economic issue, people need to make a living. People need to be accommodating to tourists and locals. I think all the points that were made tonight about health issues and the pandemic not being gone, they're all quite valid. And, you know, it is a historic review board, but I think the board has also had to change its viewpoint over the years. And Beth brought up the Portuguese, and they were here. I can't help but bring this up because the colors in the town are supposed to be so beigey and whatever, and the Portuguese, they have bright colors. So there has to be some sort of accommodation going on here, because that's never been addressed, but that's to the side. The economic value, I think, of the tents and people's health, I think, are paramount at this point. And I don't see an offensive tent in town. Does anybody? I don't think so. Anyway, I'm for the tents, and I think a good extension, like Deborah Lennox said, to study and monitor water usage. If it's not effective, keep the tents. That's what I say. Thank you.
My name is Peter Lopez, owner of Cafe Beaujolais. And I will say that the only reason Cafe Beaujolais does not have a tent is because the tent that we did have was ours and it was older, it was falling apart, so we took it down. But we're lucky enough to have more space where we don't need that tent at this point. But the other business owners that do have tents have it because they don't have that extra space. It's an undeniable fact that more tourism is coming to this area. And whether we like it or not, folks are coming up from the Bay Area, they're coming up from Los Angeles, they're coming up from around the country. We speak to them every single day. And there will be no new restaurants opening for the most part in this area because of the water usage. So the space that we've got to use the most of. And I think the folks that have tents up right now are effectively using the space that they've got to be able to accommodate those folks that are able to to get up here to Mendocino and spend weekends and provide the tax revenue that we all enjoy as a county. I will say the service dog issue is something that's also very important because more and more folks come with service dogs. We really have a very difficult time accommodating them in the Cafe Beaujolais dining room. But if we had a tent and we serve fine dining next door in a tent, we would love to be able to accommodate those folks. Such that Sandra Trillium is able to do and folks like that. So I think there's a number of reasons, including the potential for COVID to come back, that at least a one-year extension should be considered, but I think a permanent opportunity for folks to be able to have that extra space to use, because there are only a certain number of supply of restaurants in this town. Folks are going out to dinner more often. it's more expensive nowadays to eat at home almost than it is to go out at some point. So, and we're seeing that in the statistics nationally. So I think providing the ability for people to have space to eat in a setting that I think is wonderful in this town, whether it's inside or outside, is important.
Is there anyone else that wants to do this? Yeah.
My name is Susan Keller. I live in Little River. I'm a psychologist in the area. I prepared no remarks, but I was really touched by what I was hearing. I have lung problems, and COVID would really be not a good idea for me, especially before vaccines. And I think there's many more possibilities of things approaching that are even worse than COVID. I was so relieved to be able to go out to restaurants outside. And I still love that. But I will not go into the pub, Patterson's, because it's just scary. I love to be able to go outside and sit in the tent where it feels much safer. So I'm hoping just for us old folks that have problems like that, you do allow tents. Thank you.
My name is Richard, and that's my wife, but so I own the building that the Good Life Cafe is in, and I've been up here almost 50 years now. I also had several other buildings from time to time, so the gallery bookshop is across the street, the old bank building. So years and years ago, I was involved in buying those buildings and saving them in a way. The present building, charities in and so on. I mean, when I bought it, they made it put $200,000 into it the first year for foundations because it was falling in the dirt. My only point is just that I think that the idea of I think the historical thing gets a little hung up on the idea of it being like this cutesy kind of thing. It wasn't a cutesy town. When I came up there, it was a mess. And in some ways, I kayak on Big River 3 mornings a week, and I've been doing it for 15 years roughly. But if you look at old photos of Big River, there was a mill there, it was a mess. I mean, it was a mess, and all this stuff. So in some ways, I think the responsibility is to go ahead and create a place that's attractive for us and for other people to visit, and so on and so on. The fact that maybe a tent was or was in fact a thermal pane windows like solar electric or something. In some ways, what we want to do is create an environment and a place that has the spirit and feeling of that stuff. And I'm glad the historical board is here. The town could have been trashed a long time ago, but I don't think being curious about a tent was or what didn't exist back when. I don't think that's the way. And I definitely think the ideas that Deirdre brought up about let's have a moratorium and figure this out and really look at the water usage. That's the big problem. Thank you.
So my name's Sarah, and I host at Chilean Cafe. I've been there since we opened the doors. And with the pandemic, with extending the garden, we had to hire on a lot more people. And we predominantly have people that were born here that work there. Most of our staff was born and raised here, and they're raising their families here. And we provide a lot of jobs for the community, and without the tents, we would have to lay off a lot of people because we would not be able to serve in the winter outside. It would really limit our numbers. We've removed tables from the inside to make more space, to make them more comfortable. And we use the garden pretty heavily, and granted, we can't use it all of the time because sometimes it's still too cold, but it really provides a lot more space, which grants us a lot more staff. A lot of local people here can afford to live here and raise their families where they were born. And I think that's something that's really important for our community, to allow us to have jobs that can support living in Mendocino in their hometown.
My name is Sandra McElroy, and I have a tent. And I second everything everyone said, including jobs and everything. We provide at least 30 to 40 jobs for people in the community. And I'm completely open to new ideas instead of a tent. I've researched it, I've spent countless hours looking for something different that I could put there because I'd love to have something it was beautiful and more interesting and more historical and more permanent. But I've talked to several architects, and they've all kind of said I would get shut down with anything that I've showed them pictures of. So whether it be pergolas, greenhouses, louvered patio covers, they've said that they've seen it all get shut down. So I'm just putting it out there that I would completely be open to something different. Because I don't love the tent, and it's not a permanent thing, it's not gonna last forever. So I'd love to put a greenhouse out there, or a pergola, or anything, you could gazebo, but it's also a loft coverage. So if something universal could come up with, I would love to entertain that idea.
Well, many people have stole my thunder. All the thoughts I had are already gone.
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, Fred Cox, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think we're talking about tents, right? In a year, we can revisit this. We're not building permanent structures. So, to me, it's crazy. Let's keep the tent for now, and we'll see what happens. If there's no more COVID, then we can revisit it in a year or two. Yeah, anyway, that's all I got.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll bring it back up here. I don't know, would you guys wanna, would someone wanna read the letters we received into the record?
I don't have the, I don't have my phone.
So this is, I don't have, Deidre's. Yeah, we have.
Okay, so this is from Deirdre Lamb to the board members of the Mendocino Historical Review Board regarding ordinance 4472, tents in Mendocino. As water is the issue in the Mendocino Village, the first step to possibly approving the tents needs to start with MCCSD, Mendocino City Community Services District, to decide water usage. This may be the number of tables a restaurant can have, or allotment of how much water is used, and if that is more than prior to the tents that restaurants are able to use before the issue goes before the board. It is putting the cart before the horse to approve an unlimited number of tents for an unlimited amount of time without first researching the increase in water usage. When MCCSD with public input decides on a solution for the amount of water each business can use by researching their statistics to see if the amount has been increased by having the additional seating capacity of the tents. This could be done from the months prior to the pandemic, and then with a same month once the inside and outside of restaurants were both open again. Then to set some guidelines on water usage. Once the capacity of water usage is resolved, it can come before the MHRB board. The solution may be for the MHRB board to temporarily allow tents for a certain time period, up to a year, to allow for MCCSD to research, come up with guidelines on water usage. Then when the issue comes back to the board with the water information, a permanent solution can be decided upon. Thank you. The next one is from William Zimmer, MHRB. MHRB's first and foremost obligation is the preservation of the historic nature within the district. Tents that were permitted by the Board of Supervisors for the duration of the health crisis, which is now passed, in order to help restaurants survive for the duration. To allow them to remain to the detriment of the historical nature of the town means you are sacrificing its historic aspect, which is the very reason for the existence of the Historic Preservation Board, leaving instead a circus. There are alternative means of shelter available to restaurants, specifically umbrellas, which are historic for the sole benefit of restaurants which might have their maximum potential seating constrained by a minimum of compliance. Finally, I would like for the board to request signage along Main Street that prohibits RV parking. And in that same vein of youth preservation, to work with the board of supervisors to ask state parks to clear trees and brush away entirely from the headlands west of Schlafer's Garage. The views of the sea are so restricted along Main Street by foliage, a person has to walk all the way down to the intersection of Caston Street to see the bay. Thank you. And then the last one is from Ed O'Brien. Dear board members, thank you for serving the town of Mendocino on the Historic Review Board. I know from personal experience that yours is not an easy job. The pandemic that came to our world was something that we have not seen in over 100 years. Drastic steps had to be enacted to both make people safe and allow the businesses of Mendocino to stay open. Tents were a temporary solution that helped to keep our restaurants open and save jobs. Now that we can eat inside, the question is, have the tents in Mendocino served their purpose? Should they come down now? I have many fond memories of eating at night under large garden tents. Some say they should stay forever, but alas, we are a historic preservation district with strong rules and guidelines about building materials, roof lines and type of windows, color of buildings, size of signs, etc. Campus structures with large plastic sides are not in keeping with our guidelines. Mendocino should not be known as a tent city. It is my belief that the tents have served their purpose and their time is up. Thank you very much. And those were
I received one notice from Esther Leiner, who had planned to be here but was unable to, saying that ironically sick right now, but the tents have allowed them as well as their stepson and dozens of others of hardworking locals to be able to make a living during the pandemic, but also to stay healthy and stay alive, reducing their chance of getting COVID. Gowan Baptiste also commented a similar thing, that she wouldn't have been able to go out if she wasn't able to, go the good life and sit outside. So I received those comments as well. I'm gonna close the public.
Could I make a legal point of order?
Sure.
Okay. There is currently pending before the Assembly a bill, I think it's 1217, and it prescribes the semi-permanency of street-side dining, the parklets that you see in San Francisco and other cities, also satellite dining, and tents. If this Assembly bill is adopted by the legislature and eventually the Senate, its provisions specifically provide that it supersedes any city or county ordinance. So just be aware that this is pending in Sacramento right now. Thank you.
I'm going to close the public expressions portion and bring it back up here. Staff has suggested, the method that this is currently going forward is that the sort of like not worrying about permits during the time of COVID, that has been ended statewide, as well as Mendocino County. And so we have a revised 90-day clock where people will need to come in.
And just to be clear, we'll be putting a press release out that will go out through social media and to all media platforms, so that way folks will know. Like, we understand that it takes folks time to plan, come in for permits and such, so we wanted to make sure that folks will get a full 90 days from when that press release goes out, which I expect it to go out later this week.
Do we as a board have the authority to extend tents for a year and do that? Is that something we can do?
Not the review board. The Board of Supervisors has the authority to establish urgency ordinances like they did, but this board does not have that authority to create those types of rules.
We would have the authority potentially to say that we're not going to reject any tent applications that come before us in the next year, and let all the business owners know that we as a board are accepting of tents. If they can jump through all the other hoops that the county is going to put in front of them, they can at least know that by the time they get to us, we're gonna not shoot down the tent based on some historical line.
I just wanted to be clear what we have the authority to do and not. Right. There may very well be a workaround, but I wanted to know what our purview was. So that's very clear.
Well, I think it's similar, like one question I have is, right now, I'm understanding that to erect a temporary tent even for an event, people are being told that they have to come to historical review. That's been the history of, and I think that's something that we should revisit. I think it should be put on the agenda, just like we're trying to do with signage and paint, I don't think that if somebody wants to put up a tent for a wedding or an event, it needs to be reviewed by the historical review board. That seems
Except that there is certainly a section in the county code which requires approval of all tents in Mendocino by the review board. So, you know, I think, I don't know how we can avoid that.
I know public expression
Oh,
says that I'd like
sorry.
to comment on something that the board did approve the circus tent for 6 years in a row at 4th of July, so it has been done.
Okay, thank you, sorry. We want to try to keep it up here.
I think what you would say, is that basically, we don't have a problem with tents, either on a temporary basis or, you know, for another year or two, whatever we think it is, so that all of these businesses or temporary event people don't have to know that they're not going to get shut down when they come in for our body. Because there's a lot of other hoops that have to be jumped through.
And if I may just add to the discussion here, I think it's important to note that if somebody comes in to get a permit, just like the example that your land gave of getting a permit for 6 years, you can grant that somebody has no operative conditions. They are allowed to have the tent from April till October every year, at which time they pull it down, and that permit would be standing unless you specify that it was only valid for so long. So it wouldn't have to be that every year they come in, like for some of these temporary tents for weddings and such, and get their weekend dates approved, as long as they were operating in conformance with the conditions of their review board permit. So just to be clear, it's not that they have to come in every year like you do for the Mac House, which requests wedding tents for specified weekends during the summertime. It could be for a longer period.
So the mechanisms are there. So it's really interesting that, as I understand it, the original plan or intent, and probably not very well thought through given the panic, was that by putting up a tent, your business would remain the same because you had to space people out more than you did before. And what's been discovered, and it's not a great surprise, I guess, is that it has in fact resulted in businesses getting more business, employing more people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, by doing outside dining. So that's something that's really powerful. The question is, are there other issues with that, and are there other ways of tackling the problem? And there's two things. One is the water thing, which I think probably does require some investigation because we're going over short of water. And the other is, are there alternatives to tents? Because our job is to look at the village and say, do tents fit in or not? And I would be reluctant to say, scrap all the tents when I know that the businesses are benefiting from that. But I would be looking to see, are there other solutions that are more sensible, which I think the gentleman who spoke first or second suggested. So really, what the business owners want is a mechanism to get to outdoor dining, because it increases the business, it increases the number of staff they can employ, it helps the town, et cetera, et cetera. The question then is, are tents the best way to do that, the most efficient way to do that? And from our point of view, which is to look at the nature of the town, does it fit in with the nature of the town? So I think that's really the problem before us today. I think that's what we've got to think about. And a year's extension would give us time to think about that. The trouble is, are there mechanisms to do that?
I don't see us making a decision on this
No,
evening.
I
I would certainly like to have the staff perhaps come back to us to explain what possible options there are for us to consider here. And I'm personally not sure that we're the right venue for this. I think this may be a question for the Board of Supervisors. I mean, most of the arguments we've heard here are business arguments and not historical arguments, and our role is a historical role. And so I don't know how we can just decide that, well, for business reasons, we're going to ignore the historical role of this board. So I think one option here is for people to go to the Board of Supervisors and ask them to change to perhaps continue the resolution that they had before.
I think that like the Mac House, we've heard here that we can grant is that we can grant tents usage for multiple years. And it seems like it would be useful to the town if we could say, grant tent usage for another year. Well, these business owners have to still jump through a number of hoops. They have to deal with lot coverage, they have to deal with water usage, they have to deal with a number of other hoops that the county is going, I'm sure, make sure that they jump through. We could at a minimum, I think, in this board, say, we're okay with the tents for another year. We don't want to add additional insecurity to the businesses in this current time. There's a lot of reasons to go ahead and extend out the tent usage. We've heard them all here tonight. So I think that's about as much authority as we have, but we can exercise that authority rather than just punting entirely.
So if we did that, would the mechanism be for each owner to come in for a permit? That is what's to be done.
Correct.
It would have to. I
I'm
mean,
just, I want to
none of the tents in this town have been approved by this board, none of them. And clearly, our role is to look at any structure that is erected in this town and see whether we believe it fits within the character of Mendocino. So we would have to look at each one of these tents on a case-by-case basis. I don't see how we can get away from that, shortly.
If I may, I just want to note, Patterson's Club did come in and obtain an MHRB permit in 2020 for the tents, and it was for a specified time period, but it did have a condition that allowed for the review board to extend that upon written request, and that written request is actually going to come before you, not in June, but I think in July we talked about, yes. So that'll come before you in July, requesting for an extension for the tent at Patterson's Club as well.
Okay, so I do just want to make a couple points. One is that you're right, we're not going to make a decision this evening, substantially, because, one, we don't have all the information, and basically what's going to happen is, as our current authority, permits are going to start, or, applications are going to start coming in after this 90 days, likely. So there's a 90-day sort of like extension, and then we're going to start seeing them on a case-by-case basis. I am very much considering the fact that our role is for historical character, as a body, and to preserve that. But I also know that these are temporary structures. Like, I would feel differently if these were permanent structures that were allowed to be put in. So I'm certainly taking that into account. Addressing someone what was saying that the advice is that they haven't been, that this body has not okayed any alternative outdoor things. We did approve a greenhouse. It hasn't been built yet, but we approved a Victorian-looking greenhouse over near Cafe Beaujolais, for a property over there. So I would kind of like to look at those plans again to see if maybe, maybe those could be expanded upon. But yeah, I appreciate what Issue's trying to do as far as the ease of use, but I don't think we're in a position for tonight to make that sort of sweeping decision either. And it might be a supervisor instead of us.
I certainly agree with Alan that we ought to take a look at options.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there are tents, but there are other options that we could consider. And I don't think any real study has been done of this question. I mean, this is the first time that we've been faced with this question here in terms of a permanent structure.
But look, all businesses, everybody in this town is going to come up with lot coverage issues as soon as they start talking about permanent structures. There's no way around that. And so that's beyond our scope. But the maximum that we can do is to say we're okay with temporary structures that were erected in COVID's time, and there's the consideration that COVID's not even potentially over yet. There's all of these considerations. So I think at a minimum, our body can say that we're okay with the interpretation that was done as an emergency ordinance, and our body's okay with it. Obviously, there's still going to be other bodies that have to look at it. But do we really need business owners to come back to us on a case-by-case basis to get their tent approved that has already been here and is in place, that doesn't make sense to me.
I don't think we can give a blanket approval for tents, that's what worries me, what you just said yesterday.
That's what I'm saying, temporary tents.
And so, they just spring up all over the place.
I don't see giving them.
I mean, that's what you just said, really. I mean, I'm not going to do that. I have regular sympathy with the fact that people are going to have to come back on an individual basis. And I have regular sympathy with the fact that it really has improved the employment, the tax base, and everything else. I think that's a really good point, that outside dining is something that really helps. The question is, how do we get there?
I'm sorry, we've already, I think we're wrapping it up, but thank you very much, and maybe, I look forward to hearing what you guys end up doing.
Well, what I was just gonna say was that we may, when we meet next, ask the Board of Supervisors to give a year to assess this, and that might be something that this board can do as well.
Okay. So yeah, we'll look forward to hearing what the MCCSD finds.
And if you would like, staff, we can add this for, again, a discussion point with the review board for your next meeting in June as well, if you want to continue to discuss this, and maybe you've had time to, during this next month, to think about what other options maybe you might want to consider too. I think what I've heard from the community here is they want a level of assurance that they come forward with a proposal that will be a significant amount of investment for them, that this board will be able to support that.
What were we asking about then? I'm not sure what this is on the agenda tonight. It's just a discussion, right?
It's an update to move on what the status is, that's something that's been requested for a while.
So, yeah, I would like that, and yeah, I had definitely heard a lot of concern in the community, mainly because exactly what you're saying, that concern of business owners, that they cannot make any sort of planning decisions, without knowing that they have that, so.
In the document for the next meeting, we could have the staff prepare some, a written statement in terms of what the legal situation is that you tried to explain to us earlier. But I think that would be useful.
And we'll also have the press release that we talked about.
Yeah.
And I think it would be wrong from my point of view, as a board member, to say that we're going to blanket, either accept or blanket reject tents. That, some of them, there are reasons to go look at each one and see whether it fits inside the historical view of the town. And so I'm not making a decision on a blanket one way or the other.
Would you do a blanket for a period of time?
If we extended the period of time,
That's all.
if that went to the Board of Supervisors, and
All I'm saying is let's give a blanket exemption to it for one more year.
Yeah, but I don't think that mechanism is that, other than to go to the individual permits.
Okay, so we will get information on that.
We need that information.
We'll get that information.
So if I may, so the memo that you're requesting from staff would be to essentially write up the statements I made today about the status of the urgency ordinance, its expiration, what is required for the permitting, as well as what the authority is as a review board moving forward as it relates to any sort of extension on temporary tents, and any requirements for permits, et cetera. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, we have to word something that says, here's what we're going to do going forward.
I'm going to do my best to have all of that. If I need to discuss with county council, then it might be a little bit delayed, but I will put as much information as we can get together.
But as I understand it, at the moment, the way things stand, issues comment aside, the only way a business owner can remain with a tent after 90 days is to put in another permit. And I think what we're saying is there a way to change that so we can make it longer? And obviously the MSCD is going to go to the Board of Supervisors and see if they can get them to do something. And that would be useful.
Yeah, we could mention whatever's happening at the Board of Supervisors, or even what's happening in Sacramento with regard to this issue, and certainly the water issue as well.
I think the Sacramento thing, they'll do whatever they do, and it take a while.
Okay, so I want to specifically thank the public, thank you guys for coming and speaking to this. We really do take all this in. That's an amazing amount of public input as far as the comment card. So I really appreciate everyone coming out to our fourth in-person meeting. So it's very nice, it's very great to see you all here, and we will keep you posted as we learn more on this issue.
Well, I'm sorry, reminding one question, has anybody correlated that data responses to say what people say, that there's a yes, no type surveys
In the text.
and data on?
I'm sorry?
So there's a bunch of survey questions
Those
there.
are comments all pro.
They're all just commented?
They're all in support of outdoor dining.
Okay.
Some are more descriptive and more serious than others. Some are just, yeah, leave the tents, we love them, and some are why they
So
love
there
them.
wasn't like 1% that said no taking that.
I did not have, I read through every single one, and I didn't have one that said don't do them.
Specifically, what was the question that was asked?
If you look, oh, sorry.
I can just read
Thank
the
you.
part on the outside. It says, dining in the tent. If you enjoy dining in our tent during your visit, please leave us your name and a comment. The historical review board may make us take down the tents next spring. We'd like to keep it because the guests love it. And then they put their name, their email, and any comments like that. And then the other one said, if you enjoy dining in the tent, please consider leaving us your name and comment in support of keeping, I'm sorry, it's folded over, so I hope I got that right.
Right, you've answered the question, I wanted to understand what the question was, whether it was outside dining or tent. The question was about tent.
Yes.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to the next item, but I'll give everyone a moment if they, unless you want to stay and do the rest of our fascinating meeting. Item 9 is public hearing items. So our first one is case number MHRB 2022-0014. And this was continued from March 6th. Senator Switzer.
Hello, project planner Steven Switzer here. This is Vice Chair Holly Maxwell. Just noted, this project was continued on March 6th MHRB meeting to address some design revisions. Our office received on April 13th these said design revisions as well as a revised project request for review and consideration. Rather than revising the previous staff report, the extent of the redesign prompted new analysis, and this is contained in the new staff report that was distributed. I would also like to add that the agent provided this past Friday a revised plot plan that shifted the northern pump shed 18 inches to the south, and the propane tank and generator fenced enclosures were also moved to maintain a 10-foot clearance from all structures on site as well as on the northern adjacent property. In light of this, staff is recommending the review board consider the revisions to the staff report as detailed in your memo. These changes include the previous request for a 0-foot setback, for now a 3-foot setback for the pump shed and fenced propane enclosure on the northern property line. And recommended finding C also reflects these changes and reads as follows. Pursuant to Mendocino County Code Section 27240, 10A, a reduced front yard is incidental and necessary for current variance to allow a pump shed to be sited 3 feet from the property line and a utility enclosure to be sited 3 feet from the property line. As detailed in the staff report, the project complies with the applicable regulations for the Mendocino Local Family Residential MRN zoning district, as well as the historical review board design guidelines contained in Appendix 7 of the Mendocino Town Plan. Table 3 of the staff report contains the evaluation of these proposed design and applicable design guidelines. Staff is recommending the review board consider approval of the project subject to the recommended findings and conditions of approval contained in the staff report. The applicant has been provided these recommended conditions for approval. Contingent on the approval of the said MHRB permit, adequate findings will be made to further process the categorical exclusion for the proposed residential land use. I can entertain any further questions that the board or public may have.
Any questions currently? No. Okay, we'll open up to the public in just a second. Just a moment, in just a second.
Of him?
Of him, got it. Okay, go ahead.
Can we see the site plan and the location of the propane tank? And is that the revised one?
Yes.
Okay, is the propane tank 6 feet from the property line?
6 feet from the property line?
Correct.
No, 3 feet as noted in the memo.
Right, so there's a California building code that requires 6 feet. So can this board approve plans that are contrary to building code?
So,
May I speak to that one now, or when the applicant is?
Yeah, maybe what we could do, and, can you state your name again?
Todd Newberger.
Todd, thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Why don't we hold that question? Why don't we have the agent, present if you'd like to add anything to that?
Thank you.
Could Mr. Switzer give us a tour of the site plan, just with this, the end of his pencil, blue pen?
sure.
Sure.
What would you like a tour of?
Excuse me?
What would you like a tour of?
Just give me a picture of what's there.
Well, there are some renderings here of what is proposed with the current landscape on the vacant lot. We have some elevations here. This will be the southern elevation, so this will be on Ukiah Street. And looking on School Street will be this elevation here. So
Did you have a chance to look at it? Maybe you might want to look at it.
you're more than welcome to come up here and look at these. And to address Mr. Todd Newberger's comment regarding that, so recommended finding C is a concurrent variance for the reduced setback. So that would capture your concern for that setback for the propane enclosure. It's a fenced enclosure for the propane tank.
And I think in the agent's presentation, she'll probably highlight some of the changes that were made from the previous iteration, I imagine.
If I may just add on to, the building code requirements, those will be checked by the building division. So obviously any development, the review board cannot supersede building code standards, so the property owner would comply with any requirements of the California building code.
So any other questions for Planner Schweitzer at the moment? Okay, so if we could have the agent come up and make a presentation.
Thank you, board members, thank you, public. I have Marcia Trimble, the owner, is going to be on speakerphone with me. And as Mr. Schweitzer has been extremely patient with me getting these little details in at the last minute here about the changes about the propane tank and the setting of the trees. We've been moving around a little bit, and I would like to make one note on your staff report that we went with a yellow called mayonnaise, and it's not listed in condition number 8. And I do have a sample of the mayonnaise here, and I think I called out the color is, it says misty gray, but it's mayonnaise. So could we please make that note in the conditions of approval? So
It's a pale yellow, yes.
it's a very pale yellow, extremely pale yellow. So yes, we have made a significant change. We listened to the review board, we listened to the neighbors, we listened to the public, and Marcia had a downsize in her needs for the space that she wanted, which seemed to be in keeping with what we had heard from the feedback from the review board members. So we had previously been working on a water tower, and so I took that one back out. It seemed way far away, and we brought it back to the table and developed it out to be the project that you see before you here. So when we did that, we also did, Tom was asking about the site plan. Let me give you a little site plan. You can walk through if you like. There's a landscaping plan there, but since you know how to read plans, you can see this here. In fact, the previously submitted project, which you weren't here for, is this outline on the lot in this rendering here, whereas this is our new proposed footprint, which is like a little bit, almost 60% of what it was before. And then the front line was along the 20-foot setback from Ukiah Street, and we pushed this one way back and moved it over as far to the northeast corner of our buildable lot area as we could. So this line here is showing the buildable area, the 20-foot setback from Ukiah, the 20-foot setback from School Street, the 6-foot yard on each side. And then, as Stephen mentioned, we were asking to push some of the incidental outbuildings closer to the rear fence. We brought them a little further forward because you gotta get behind it to hammer the plywood, so I brought the pump house back forward from where it was last time. These little outbuildings have been moving around, and there were more. There was a larger bike shed here before that we eliminated. There was a pump house and electric panel storage here for the required battery storage for the new energy code, but I ended up moving those over into a larger mechanical room that's connected to the building. So we've eliminated a couple of the smaller buildings we had before. And then speaking to this propane issue, the propane tank and the generator were too close to each other previously, so I moved them apart from each other, so they're 10 feet apart. The propane tank was 10 feet from the house, and then we went ahead and I looked up the neighbor's theoretical shed over here, and I went 10 feet from that, but actually propane tank that's over 250 gallons have to be 10 feet from the property line, so this is going to be 125 gallon propane tank. And there are no setbacks for 125 gallon propane tank. We're not going to dance the building around the propane tanks. Those are actually, this one is probably mostly going to run the generator, but with the battery storage, these are all, we may not need them, but we want them approved in case we do need them. So there's that.
And then at the site visit today, you mentioned that the bush that's on that corner is going to remain.
Correct. So there's you can see it on these Google Maps here. There's two large bushes, and we were going to take them out and just put trees there. We were going to put a magnolia tree in the corner, and I said to Marcia, you know, it's kind of a nice quince plant that's very dense, and so it's going to create a nice buffer zone between her deck and the activities at the Beaujolais, so there'll be a little bit of a buffer. So we're going to keep that quince, and we're going to move we're keeping the quince, and we're going to move the pistachio over pomegranate, which that one has its flowers in the autumn, and then the tulip magnolia will be in the corner here. And this is going to be a pretty big tree. I took it out of the rendering so you can see the volume of the proposed structure. And one of the things about this rendering that I found very useful for everyone is just to kind of show the space and the context. And you can actually see another water tower in the distance. So to me, this really shows how the building sits in the space and how appropriate it is for the architecture of the neighborhood, because I know that was a question that we had last time. Thank you. And one last thing. This is this was the first building that was approved on this site. I don't know if anyone was in the Zoom meeting when they approved this building. You guys approved this building, but it's like a barn. Basically, it was a barn. This is the site plan of it down below. So that would have been, if that was built, that would have been here. It would have been a big two-story structure right here. And I feel like we've pushed things back and we've taken this tower portion, which is the taller part, and we put it in the back, as far back to the northeast as we can, and that not only allows a better view from the top of the tower, but it also we have the kitchen window looking into the backyard of the neighbor up here, and now that we're over as far as we can with the two-story space, it allows a view past to the west of the tower for the people behind. That wasn't the design, that wasn't the main reason, but it was just something that came about, and because we could have mirrored it, but we didn't, we decided to keep it with the tower on the east side.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll open this up to public comment. If anyone would like to address, please come up and state your name if you'd be so willing.
Tom Thompson. I came to this meeting swearing I wouldn't say anything. However, I have been aroused. And that is a compliment, because I think you have very nicely respected the building over here, which I remodeled.
Oh.
And that gives some light to here, though, and it also gives some real privacy, continuous privacy, as well as the openness of the view across that property. So, thank you.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak to this? Go ahead.
Hi, here's Red Lamb. So I feel like the initial design was 1,136 square feet. They've gotten it down to 730 square feet. That's a very small house. The footprint is 600 square feet at the bottom. When I was at the site view today, it seems like they have addressed all the issues with the views for the neighbors to the north, to the neighbors to the west, and I can't think of a nicer, cute design that seems to be harmonious with the environment. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this?
Yes, please. Good evening. My name is Todd Newberger. I'm a local architect. I want to start by applauding Deborah for your efforts and the revisions from the previous version to this version. You've obviously listened to the community and taken some of those thoughts into consideration. If you would, could I take one moment while I'm here and just, I didn't get a good chance to look at this rendering, so I want to look at it here for one quick moment. Okay. So, I want to make clear that I'm speaking on behalf of Andrea Shepherd, by the way, I should have said that. Andrea Shepherd's property is immediately north of this property here. Andrea's concern is not her private view, and discussion of people's private views is really not the purview of what's happening here. And I don't think that this board is protecting anybody's private views. This board is here to protect all of our public views in the character and quality of being in the town of Mendocino. So the water tower is a wonderful concept. What is objectionable is the exterior staircase that protrudes beyond the edge of the building and beyond the edge of the top deck. Water towers, if you look at all of these pictures, not a single one has that type of staircase. When they do have staircases, like the one across the street, there's a door out the side of the lower unit, and there's a very narrow staircase that comes up actually through the deck. There's no water towers that I've seen where the stairs are outside the water tower and they come all the way up to that level as a mass and then turn onto this deck. So, and the way that deck is anchored
There's two
in...
of those pictures of those
Okay.
stairs right
Well,
there.
you'll show me those
Yeah,
then
so I could
on your
shine
rebuttal,
it on
because this is
yours.
my turn, right?
Okay, it'll be your turn, I'm just saying.
2 minutes.
Please.
2 minutes.
So, that to me is not historical. The way this is attached to the building is not done historically in the character of the water tower. The other item is this entry, a flat roof over the entry with a shed roof. This doesn't seem to be in character with the way water towers were described. So I sent an email to Deborah and I did a presentation that I wanted to just show to the board. If the interior staircase was extended up to the deck with a roof hatch, the exterior stair could be eliminated. And if a simple gable roof were placed over the entry, all four sides of the water tower could be symmetrical and look very pleasing and very simple and clean line. So we presented that to Deborah for consideration. We present it now to the board for consideration. And besides the propane tank needing to be a certain distance, the enclosure can be 3 feet if you grant that variance. If building department will deal with the tank, should it be, I suppose. The last comment was that if most of the water towers are shingle style, and perhaps this might look good in a shingle style rather than a board style, if we're looking for historical character. So we would ask for your reconsideration on the exterior staircase primarily, and secondly, the reconsideration of this deck over a flat roof with a shed at an entry, where we think the gable would look much more historical in character. I would take questions.
I'm curious, under your plan, how would you get up to the deck?
The spiral staircase, which is already taking up floor area in this upper level, would be extended up to that deck with a roof hatch. It'd be quite straightforward, and in fact, I think it would be beneficial for someone who would not have to go outside in the elements, they can come straight up. It's an idea.
Come straight up, so we could be outside the elements.
Hey, it's an idea. If we want, the discussion's the historical character of the town of Mendocino, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we're at.
Thank you very much. Is anyone else interested in speaking to this item?
Do I get a rebuttal?
Hold on just 1 second. So I'm gonna bring it, so seeing none, going once on the additional public comment? Okay, so I wanna bring it up here and see if there's any questions or comment, and then we'll give you a chance
Just
to.
a little bit further up, so carry on. Right. I'm done. Right here. How much less?
Yeah.
I think the previous design, we have all this is all those things to listen to and implemented. And I guess I'm interested in hearing Deborah's rebuttal, because I think this does answer all the questions we had last time.
So did you want to address the?
Just a couple of small misconceptions perhaps. As far as the tower stair, for one thing, Marcia, we discussed at length about using a ladder instead of a staircase. And we also discussed, and I've been in the one at the Nicholson house where you go up and it's a hatch, and it's really not she's not a young person that wants to go run up a hatch. So she's concerned about safety with the staircase, and that's why every project I've presented with her always has a regular staircase with a handrail. And so it's a safety issue for her. And I did find a couple of water towers that had a little bit exterior stair thing there's lots of stairs on the exterior of water towers. But there's one that actually does the same configuration that goes around the corner. It's in Fort Bragg, but there is an example here to look at if you want. And they've just built a brand new one across the Highway 1 that has the staircase that's on the outside and goes up, and there's an extension of the deck on top. So that part of it is already been modeled in the neighborhood. And then the other thing is that when I started looking at these water towers for examples to try to emulate, every water tower is different. That's the other nice thing about it. When you get into the historical book of water towers, they get even wilder. So, for instance, Jade's Tower, which is this one down here, I mean, no water tower looks like that. That's a unique water tower. So I would say that one of Marcia's water tower is fairly understated. It's only 2 stories. And we've tried to keep the historical elements as close to other elements in town, but we're not trying to mimic another water tower. We're trying to use those elements to create a new project, and that to me is within the intent of the design guidelines. So,
Okay, thank you.
I have two questions. One is, the knee brace that supports the landing there, do you actually think that's going to be adequate, or do you think you'll end up needing to drop posts at that location?
No, I already talked to Dave Duncan about that,
Uh-huh.
and he says it can be done. I would prefer to cantilever out a piece of steel and eliminate it, but I put it in there just in case we need to use it.
You're not planning to drop a vertical
No,
post?
no post.
And then my only other concern is the entryway. I don't know of very many examples where there are flat roof decks over living space. I tend to see that as a modern thing, where you have a flat roof deck and a porch on top. We have some examples in town where there's flat roof decks, like at Oddfellows Hall or at Bayview Cafe, but they're usually open below. I'm not really.
Well, the Catamount House, the one that is being built on Albion Street, that deck goes in and it's over.
But it goes in building line. It goes building line, flat roof deck, inside the building line, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly fond of the idea of opening up the door to flat roof decks. I think we're gonna find that if we accept that detail, we're gonna see that people are gonna wanna keep doing that, and it's really actually a modern look, not a historical. There's no historical precedent for that look, I don't think.
I think there's a house on Calpella that has.
Yeah, it's for sale right now, and it has a flat roof deck.
Yeah.
Brand new house.
Brand new house, there you
Yeah,
go.
that's a year and a half old.
That is something that I'm considering in this discussion. When I first got on the board, Ed O'Brien and I walked around and he was saying, you know, like, we're not trying to recreate in a Disneyland fashion. You know, like there's been very few new construction, you know, in a sense. And there are all these buildings that are very modern in town, which I guess those were before maybe the time of the review board. But I do give a fair amount of weight to the applicant in the sense that, you know, that I think it would meet the historical character. I think this is much more in line with the historical character than the one that we saw before.
I certainly agree with that. I certainly agree with that. I just think that particular detail, you know, it's just modern roof deck material, flat roof deck. You come out on top of the roof deck and you can have a balcony. That's just not, I don't think there's any historical precedent for that, but I agree that overall the project is much more historical.
Paul, did you want to add?
Well, I was just gonna say, I think as far as the exterior staircase, I think Barry Cusick's water tower has an exterior staircase. So I think there's certainly a precedent for that.
I think it's within the legs.
It's like
Oh,
two
it's-
feet wide. It's like this wide, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other, there's some recommended, is there any support with moving forward?
I would support moving forward with this, yes.
Is there any open for any other further comments from us, or we're shut
I
down?
believe not. I believe we've closed the public comment portion of it.
Is there any room to open it back up?
I think we have a lot of things that we have to cover, unfortunately.
Well, I can live with this design that we have here. I'm comfortable with it.
So, it was a tepid, but is that a motion?
I can make a motion, yeah, to approve this MHRV permit with the minor amendments that were made, I think, subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report.
And I second that, based on my comment.
Great. So you guys have on number 8, there was the alteration of color?
Yeah. So we have a motion made by Kapler, seconded by Saunders, to approve the project with an amendment to condition 8 regarding the color mayonnaise, a very pale yellow. So, board member.
Hold on a second, I just want to ask you guys before we go. So none of you guys are concerned about flat roof decks as a precedent going forward? I think you're gonna find that as people realize that they can do that in this town, we're gonna see a lot of applications for flat roof decks.
There's no land left to build.
Well, modifications, remodels, et cetera, et
You
cetera.
don't have to answer, if we can't, can we speak or not, because
I think that what we'll find is people will be able to use that to enclose living space and to create decks over living space. It's a modern element, and we're gonna open the door for that, I think. So I would support this project with that roof area there modified. I think the exterior stair, we can live past, there are certainly lots of different water towers and ways to get up to water towers, but I think having a roof deck over living space, that's gonna come back to haunt this board later on. I can hear people already saying, well, it happened down there, so.
And we will listen, but we don't necessarily have to agree.
Okay.
Yeah. So your point is that you're not expecting an influx of.
If it happens, it happens, but I think our job is to look at the overall, look at the place and decide whether we like it or not, and that's regardless of whether there's a precedent or not.
Is it whether we like it, or is it whether it's?
Well, we like it in the sense that our job is to fit within the historic
Right.
view of the town.
And I guess what I'm saying is that flat roof decks over living spaces are not historical. They weren't built, there was no way to waterproof them in.
Right, why do you think these became more popular?
Because we have modern building membranes and they allow you to have, deck space over living space. Second story, walkout decks. Nice.
I'm sorry.
I'm supportive of doing that, but I certainly appreciate your comments. Okay, so we have a motion and a second?
We do have a motion and a second with, the motion and the second includes a modification to condition 8. I'm just wondering if after further discussion, there's any, any desire to modify the motion? No, okay. So, board member Alm, what is your vote?
Yes.
Board member Madrigal,
Yes.
board member Saunders,
Yes.
and board member Kapler.
Aye.
So the project is approved unanimously with a vote 4-0.
Thanks for that. Thank you. Okay, moving on to. All right, what are we moving on to? I believe there was so this is 2022-0017, Peter Lopez, and this is planner Star.
Thank you, Chair Madrigal. Hello, I'm Hannah Peter. Today I'm presenting MHRB 2022-0017. Just as mentioned, this project was continued from March 6th. As discussed in the staff report, this project is after the fact request to replace the driveway, backyard, walkways with new materials. The driveway and backyard would be constructed of basalite, artisan slates or briquettes, Torino color, and the walkways would be constructed of basalite plank pavers, Turkey color. The applicant also installed a replacement sign. Picture attached here of the board. The project site is within the NU Mendocino mixed-use zoning district as shown in the zoning display map. On March 2nd, 2023, staff received an email from the applicant requesting a 2-month continuance to Mendocino Historical Board review meeting for May 1st, 2024. Applicant revised project to include a charging station that would be concealed with a redwood slate cabinet and located in front of a converted carriage house. See memo attached. The proposed vehicle charging station is consistent with the NCC section 20.76005004. Fences should be made from wood and section 20.760.045. Mechanical equipment such as electric vehicle charging stations should be effectively screened from public view or obtained in an MHRB permit. As discussed in the staff report and the memo, staff find the proposed project consistent with the NCC section 20.76.065. See findings and conditions in staff report. Staff is recommending the board to adopt the findings and conditions presented in the March 6, 2023 staff report and adopt an additional condition specific to the vehicle charging station, recommended condition number 15. For the record, staff would like to edit that condition to number 17. This concludes my presentation, and I am available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Here? Okay, we have the applicant, Mr. Lopez and Ms. Warren. Do you guys have anything to add? You don't need to add anything if you don't want to, but.
I just have one thing to add, which is I have copies of the pavement that was there, which was impermeable and concrete and cracked, damaged, etc., and in need of replacement. And we replaced it with permeable substance that was visually more appealing, safer to walk down, etc., with the hope that we were improving the landscaping of the property to the approval of what the board would see appropriate.
Thank you. Yeah, the bricks are more permeable, excuse me, than the previous. Okay, I'm gonna open this up to the public. We welcome participation. If anyone would like to speak to this item, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this item? Clear the house. Okay, I'm gonna close the public comment. Was there any correspondence on this item received by staff? I don't believe so. Okay. Bringing it back up here, is there any questions, or would someone like to make a motion?
I like it, I think it's really nice, that's back there, and the pavers are better, so things
I
improve.
just wanted to make one comment. I am somewhat disappointed that the owners of the Nicholson House didn't seek approval of the review board before doing the work in question. I think that is a shame, and I don't think that should happen. Having said that, however, I think that the work that has been done and that we've seen is of excellent quality, and I think it's a wonderful addition to our neighborhood. So I'm quite pleased to be able, in the end, to support this proposal and this agenda item.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve this project.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Sure. So we have a motion by Hall, seconded by Member Kapler. And I just want to include that the recommended additional condition will be numbered 17 and not 15 as described in the memo. What is your vote, Board Member Saunders?
Aye.
What is your vote, Board Member Madrigal?
Aye.
And Board Member Kapler?
Aye.
And Board Member Ong?
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
Congratulations.
Nice job.
Thank you, Tia.
So I believe item 9C is asked to be pulled, is that correct?
Senator Walden, if I may, you can discuss. Thank you, board members. Senator Walden for Mendocino County Planning and Building Services. And yes, the MHRB application 2022 number 19 for the Mendocino Sotheby's building at the east end of Main Street is requested to be continued, where the memo is stating for June 5th, the next available hearing. The applicants have been in contact with us today, stating they're having some scheduling conflicts with their window schedules that was requested to be brought back as part of the revised application. And it may be more appropriate for a July hearing rather than a June hearing. They do have elevations that they are bringing
when they receive their window list. We did do a site visit today. The question today that's not on the memo is, will we be having our Mendocino Historical Review Board on July 3rd? Or should we continue this for the June 5th, where it may be continued again?
I think we'll discuss that in a little bit.
Okay, so the applicant is not present,
Right.
but I am available and I have been in correspondence with them.
Do you think they would wanna?
They would feel more comfortable with a July hearing,
Okay.
but
If
because
there is
the
no
third, it's July 3rd is the MHRB regularly held meeting, where the 4th of July is Tuesday, which is a holiday. And so if we were going for the July 3rd, just because of the holiday, I wasn't sure if we were keeping that schedule.
So maybe, I do think that's a discussion, but I want to get these other items done. Is it possible to postpone the decision on this just for a couple, a couple more items?
Yes.
Okay, I want to do that. So that we can handle 9D, which is applicant Teddy Winslow and the sign shop. So, who would present this? Claire Cherry.
Great, so the property owner at the corner of Lansing and Ukiah has asked to replace a sign. This is an example of the sign that they're asking for approval of. It would be a wood sign, predominantly stained brown, with some gold and yellow and copycat seeing some nice pop job. It would go basically in the location where there is an existing sign. It is not flush mounted to the building, so signs that are not flush mounted require special consideration. That's one of the reasons why it's not on consent. And it would also be a pole sign. There are other pole signs in the area. We did a site view today. Across the street, there are some pole signs. So you do see them around town, but they do require, under the code, special consideration by the building code. I am available should you have any questions.
The only thing that struck me is that there's some confusion in the staff report, because it says the street address is Lansing Street, but it's really Ukiah Street.
So this particular building does face Ukiah Street, but the building is one of a group of buildings where the property is addressed on Lansing Street. This particular building isn't independent of the building where the Good Life Cafe is located. It's on the same property. So the property owner there who was here earlier this evening, there's, I think, 4 buildings on the property altogether, and the property itself is addressed on Lansing. Is that clear? Okay, thanks.
Any questions of Claire Cherry? Okay. Does the app?
I just realized if I could also, I didn't prepare the staff report, but I'm reminded that this particular sign permit reflects what is staff's ongoing effort to respond to comments from the review board. For example, there are conditions limiting the use of modern technology like web addresses or phone numbers on the sign. And one of the conditions that the review board has been adopting for more than 35 years, we are not including in our recommendations because it really is prohibitive to grant an exception for a future sign when there's a condition on the permit saying the permit cannot be transferred to another business. So we've tried to accommodate many of the comments that we've heard from the review board over these last several months in crafting the conditions for this specific permit.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I believe the applicant is here. Do you want to add anything?
Sure. The only thing I want to add, like Debbie is that for $553 application fee, it seems as if you're already addressing the issue of making it a little bit more easy for businesses to do things without waiting months to get approval from certain boards about, it's the same size sign,
It's just about the same colors, just about more natural, actually, less blue, a little more wood color. But realistically, I would appeal to you guys to make this a little less bureaucracy be a little more easy for us to manifest these things, and then the nickel and dime of the expense of, and Rick Sachs, the sign maker, had told me that it used to be something like 40 or 50 bucks. You go in, you get approval, and they let you put your sign out, especially if there's already one existing that's that size. So I just want to appeal to you guys to maybe streamline those kind of little things that make this doing business in town so excessively bureaucratically difficult.
Please come back next month. We'll have a sign.
Because we really have, yeah, we really have.
I appreciate you
It's
guys.
just the timing was, yeah.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
have made strides, yeah, thank you. Is there any members of the public that would like to speak to this item? Okay. I'll bring it back up here. Does anyone want to make a motion or?
I do.
Go ahead.
Let's just make a motion here to approve permit 2023-0003, subject to the findings of and conditions of the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call?
Sure. We have a motion and a second to approve the application as presented. Board member Saunders, what is your vote?
Aye.
Board member Magical?
Aye.
Board member Ong?
Aye.
And board member Kapler?
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
And thanks for reinforcing the point about science, because we agree with that.
Yes. Staff has been getting an ear hole from us. Okay, moving on to matters from the board. I am going to add an item that was not listed, which is that this is Juliana Cherry's last meeting with the Historical Review Board, and we just want to acknowledge her work and service. So Ian, of course, let me know that he could not be here at this momentous meeting, but he did write this for on your behalf. I apologize for not being in attendance for your final meeting supporting the Mendocino Historical Review Board, but would like to pass on my and our appreciation through Vice Chairman. Thank you for your service to the county and your 9 years as senior staff to MHRB. You have provided steady and thorough support for the board, helping us to make better decisions for the historic preservation of our local community. Always with code in hand and a deep understanding of its subtle nuances, you have provided us with experience, knowledge, and guidance. For this, we are grateful. Your skills will be missed, but feel confident that as a result of your efforts, the residents and visitors will enjoy a coastal Mendocino that everyone will be able to enjoy for many years to come. On that note, we wish you great success in your next chapter. Best of luck, you will be missed.
Certificate of appreciation that comes with this as well. Now we're going to make this much more beautiful and have it officially signed by the chair as
So
well.
it's
But this is
quasi-official.
So I will get this to you, hopefully maybe even by Thursday if it all works out. But yes, so that'll be coming to you. Thank you.
Well, if I may, thank you so much for those kind words, and I felt when the job was offered to me in 2014, it was just a perfect fit for me. I specialize in historic preservation and coastal planning, and it has been my pleasure to work on the Mendocino Town Plan update, to come every month to hear public input on this beautiful town, and to facilitate that hearing with the board. Thank you so much for these opportunities. I very much enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations. Okay, so we still have a couple more items. I believe we're going, let's see. We have this streamlining commercial sign ordinance. What do we need to continue on that?
I'm sorry, I missed.
On the 10B, the streamlining of commercial sign permits, I thought we did that in the last meeting.
I wanted to continue it. Last meeting, we continued it to this meeting, and if you want to we had discussed maybe continuing it to the next meeting, but we actually, I think, even though it's a matter from the board, for the board to discuss, formally just if you would like to decide to continue it to the June meeting, staff can bring a memo then. Staff has heard what the review board has said and worked on a memo, but we just really weren't quite there. We're presenting tonight as something that summarized and reflected the board's input.
Okay, so I'm gonna push that to our next meeting.
Okay.
That's okay. So matters from staff, we have the update on the urgency ordinance for water tanks.
Yes, on April 20th, the Board of Supervisors terminated the local emergency due to drought, and that actually resulted in the expiration of 2 different urgency ordinances that have been adopted by the board during the 2020, the start of the urgency in 2021 of the drought. So the first of those ordinances was a required finding for discretionary permits that needed to be made about potential impacts on water demand, so that has been rescinded as of this time. And then the second, and probably most important to this review board, is the temporary water tank installations. And so the Board of Supervisors have provided for essentially a streamlined permitting procedure. Tanks were exempt from needing any sort of building permits, and there was also exceptions to setback criteria for temporary tanks to be located in the front yards of properties. So as I stated during the board meeting as well, there's a 30-day period now where property owners either need to remove those tanks or come in for proper permitting. I'm unsure if there's actually any in town that took advantage of that. But if they did, they would need to come in and submit those permits similar to the temporary tents conversation within those 30 days if they wish to retain them.
Yeah, wasn't there one on, like in front of Oddfellows Hall, I think there was a, so I'm not sure
Yeah,
what's
so
the process
it's
yet.
fenced. That was my client, and he fenced it.
Yeah, there
Okay,
is
so-
an exemption
yeah,
for
so-
water tanks in
yeah.
the current regulations if you have fully enclosed them. So,
Okay.
so it may be that one is completely in line with
It's
that.
fenced.
Yeah, it is, yeah, it
Make
is,
sure.
it is.
This is for those that are not fenced, and it also
Okay.
applies again to the entirety of the county, not just to the town of Mendocino.
All right.
So I think fencing is one example, but I think the exemption talks about clad in wood. So I think the history, the exemption reflects the history in town that water tanks used to be wood. So today, people don't typically purchase wood water tanks, but the exterior can be clad in wood shingles or wood boards and have the appearance of being cooped.
Fence.
So after 30 days, they'll now need to go through the process.
The permit, the building permit and the MHRB permit if an exemption can't be granted.
Any questions?
So it's 30
I have a
days,
question.
not 90 days?
Yeah, we actually, it was a lesser time period for the temporary tanks. Mainly because the temporary tents, there was more concern about the amount of time it may take for somebody to develop plans and come in and get those properly permitted, whereas a tank is typically something that is standard. You're not gonna be going to an architect to draw a set of plans for your temporary tank typically.
So are you sending out notices to people? or-
I provided public comment at the board meeting to note that, and that will likely also be a portion of the press release that I will be putting out, that will be talking about the ending of these 2 various urgency ordinances.
We have a question from the public?
Yeah, thanks, Deirdre Lamb. It's my understanding that if a fence is in the backyard of a district property, that it could be up to 6 feet without having to have MHRB approval. So if someone does install a water tank and puts a fence in front of it, then I don't see any necessity for having to pay fees and come before the board. So that's my comment. Thank you.
If I may respond through the chair, we always encourage property owners to come in and talk to planning and building services to see if their project, as they would like to build it, would require an MHRB permit. We look every time to see if we can exercise exemptions first. It makes our job easier, it makes everyone else's. And also, coming in allows us to also look at whether a building permit might be needed. So the best suggestion, as people approach you throughout town about whether or not they need a permit, is to just come in and talk with the friendly faces in our department. And we're happy navigate what sometimes feels like a bureaucratic process.
Okay, I have a question about that, but I'll ask it later. Okay, so July meeting, I just have to say that in my experience, on other boards I've sat on, we have not held a July meeting because it is such a nightmare to schedule around and people are often, is it possible to plan to not do a July meeting?
I would just suggest you may also consider this review, where you've done it before, where they meet the second Monday instead of the first Monday, so like July 10th, I think that would be.
Yeah. Are there any opinions on the board?
I have. Is the fourth?
Third.
The third, yeah.
I mean, the 10th would be a better date, and I would rather not.
You'd rather not miss?
If there's work to be done. I mean, we're holding up people otherwise.
And it's hard for us to say because not all applications have been filed yet, that may be coming before the board in July, so.
Well, if there's no applications, then we would not do it.
Yes.
Okay, so,
Second Monday sounds interesting.
okay, so it sounds like the second Monday would be preferable. And if there's little on the agenda, you'll let us know.
So I think that would be most likely a special meeting, so maybe,
For
it
July.
sounds like you've had some good discussion and consensus, so we could just reflect that in the record that the board unanimously agrees to have a special meeting on July.
So just to briefly, so we're gonna schedule a special meeting for July 10th. And then to just briefly go back to 9C. Do you think the applicants would be more happy with July 10th as a possibility for continuing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Federal,
Yes.
for the applicant, yes, July, they would feel more comfortable being able to prepare a better window list and elevations.
Yes, okay, perfect. I apologize, there was the, sorry, go ahead.
You could do a formal motion to continue that.
Could I get a motion, this is for 9C, to continue that to, July 10th?
We'll make a motion to continue to July
Second.
All those in favor?
10th. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so then. And then lastly, were there any other matters from the board?
I have one. I think we should get on our agenda to address the requirement for review of temporary event tents. I think that if people, businesses want to erect a tent for a wedding or a party, the requirement that they come to the historical review, I don't think we should have. I don't see it as a problem for people to erect a tent for a weekend or a few days. So I think we should have that discussion put on the agenda.
Keep that in your advisement.
Can you put that on the agenda for July?
July 10th.
What is there, a
Does
June
anyone
meeting?
want to move to be adjourned?
Is there a June meeting?
That's me.
Do I